Yeah, every time I listen to school, for example, they have to.
So that.
It's a memo that I was. Oh, it's right. We're all very much vaccinated. Yes. Definitely, I think there's a. Oh, but just to let you know that. Okay, thank you. Thanks. You know, where you know. That's right. Oh, there you go. Good start. Here's give me the song. Good morning.
Yes.
Keeping this up.
I think we're ready to go. Thank you all so much for being here. Senator, if you want to start with some opening remarks, then we can just go around the table and start the conversation from there.
Yes, thank you very much for coming together. I know that I thank OHA and all of you for coming together because I know everybody's schedules have to be changed and juggled and to accommodate us all coming together to address gender-based violence against Hawaiian women and girls. It is it is an issue that we should be focusing on, and as you know, it took me a number of years to change the VAWA grant program that allows Native or Indigenous nonprofits to serve American Indian and Alaska Native girls and women, but because of drafting issue with the original original VAWA laws that enabled the Native Hawaiian organizations to participate in the grant program. It took me a number of years to get it changed specifically so that Native Hawaiian organization could serve Native Hawaiian women and girls who are experience gender-based violence. It's kind of amazing that we had to do this, and it was a joint effort, of course, with the U.S. House, and the president signed the fix to VAWA only recently, and so we can very much, add this capability or capacity to all the work that you all are already doing to address this scourge that impacts our Native Hawaiian community to a greater extent than other communities. So thank you very much. I think what we're gonna do is if everyone can introduce themselves and spend maybe 3 to 5 minutes talking about your focus on gender-based violence against the Native Hawaiian women and girls. And I think the expectation is that if I have a specific question, some of this I hope will be a conversation. Obviously, this is a big issue that we're not gonna just do this one time and that's it. I hope that we'll be able to continue our conversations, but if I have a question or something or clarification, I will ask you, and I think Kina will. Hello. She'll help to keep things going because once I start these, I never look at my watch. I can go on. Oh, you gotta go. Thank you for your patience. Okay, who do we start with you?
Sure.
Dr. Nisi, thank you so much.
Aloha, Senator, and thank you for allowing us to be able to host this today. Sylvia Hussey, the Chief Executive Officer of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and I wanted to be sure that we acknowledge our trustees who are here as well in support. Trustee Kalea Akaka, Oahu trustee, as well as Trustee Luana Alahua, and Molokai Lanai trustee. Do we have other trustees? I think. Okay, and if they do, they'll be joining us. But welcome, and we are here to support the efforts of our community.
Do you want to, are each of you going to talk a little bit about any particular focus that you have on the issue before us?
I'm going to have
Oh,
our
okay.
community members.
All right.
Aloha Kakayaka Senator Sherry Daniels, our Chief Executive Officer, Papaololo Kahi, the Native Hawaiian Health Board. And it's great, mahalo trustees for being here to support us and everyone else at the table. I think for Papaololo Kahi, our role has really been the bridger, the engager. We sit on different committees with the Status and the Commission of Women, the Commission on the Status of Women, the work group, the task force. And so we've been very fortunate to support efforts such as the report that came out, as well as the Pohana o na Wahine and their resource center that's opening up. And so I think for us, we're really wanting to empower community and have resources that can support the work that they're doing, not duplicate work. And I think we're here today to really see how we can continue that momentum moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha Senator, I'm Lisa Watkins-Victorino. I'm the research director here at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and I've been working with Tara as a co-chair of the task force, and we've been working with Nikki Cristobal, the researcher, who hasn't been able to attend today, but hopefully any questions that you do have from the report, you can also forward to her. And so my role is really to help ensure that not only the task force moves forward and that we consider, you know, all of the different players as part of this issue, but also to help with the reporting and making sure that we can get some of the important data, so strategizing about how to get the data.
That's one of the things that we don't have enough of, or we have certain percentages, for example, you know, there's a military role here in these kinds of situations, and so I'm going to be engaged with them also, but the collection of data. So yes, focus on something.
Aloha kako. I'm Venus Rossetti Maderas. I'm the CEO for Halekipa. Halekipa has been around for 52 years, working with our young people, ages, you know, from 8. 8 has been our youngest. Runaway shelters, we have runaway shelters. We also have an outreach program, and we do transitional living homes. To shed the light on what we're doing with sex trafficking and our sexual exploitation, young people, we've been doing outreach out in Waikiki. So we do have a youth outreach program to identify young people who may have been sex trafficked. We help to partner with different organizations to get them housed and assessed and stabilized. We do have a shelter right now at Hawaii Youth Correctional Facility at Kawailoa. So we have a shelter for women and young girls and boys to come and get destabilized. And then we also help them get an assessment and look at where we can triage some of the services for them. We work with their families to try and get them back home. And if not, then if they need more extensive treatment, we work with Pearl Haven. So our girls will go to Pearl Haven. And then also we have other organizations that will continue with mental health treatment and counseling that we work with. Yeah, so what we've been finding is that majority of the perpetrators have been military and tourism, so tourists, but
So,
recently,
you just explain a bit, does this mainly come to light when you are working with the women and girls in Waikiki, that a lot of them are being trafficked by, they're being trafficked by military people?
well, they,
Or-
well, the customers, I would say, would be, yeah, military. We find tourists as well. A lot of stuff is happening online too,
Yes.
right? We know that there's substance use involved. And so that's a whole other, you know, way of having to get them tied in, you know, hooked in to sex trafficking is by using drugs, substances. Also just the mental work, right? Like brainwashing, you know, grooming, all of that stuff that comes along with sex trafficking.
Halekipa is a residential program, so you do a lot of hands-on work, so how, what is the word I'm looking for? How do you even, enable your, do you call them clients, residents, how do you refer to participants? How successful are you in getting them out of the situation and the educational support, the mental health support? What needs to be provided in order for them to be out of this kind of exploitation?
So one of the things is that it's challenging, I'll be honest, because of the brainwashing that has occurred. A lot of times the girls will come in, we'll work with them, stabilize them, assess them, and then they end up going back. And so we've had maybe 2-3 times where they've gone in and out before they finally realize what's been happening to them. So part of it is really working and being patient, because it's ever since 2018 when we decriminalized youth prostitution, we needed a place for them to go, right? So with that, it takes a lot of work, a lot of mental health treatment. You know, and then even with health, you know, some of them might have some health issues because of that. So, yeah, so I'll be honest, it is challenging, but we work with other community organizations and partners to help us with it. Yeah.
In 2018, we decriminalized sex work here
For you.
for you.
So our shelter right now will work with any age, as far as minimal age, but up until 18 years old.
I think it was meant to be a good thing, just to jump in, but it also created a space for people who take advantage of children to also begin to target them and engage them in commercial sex trafficking. So it created an opportunity, and there's definitely some good things about that.
So, but it's not just happening in Waikiki, right? It's everywhere. You know, across our state, it's happening. And yeah, but that's where we do a lot of the outreach, because they find their,
Yes. Thank you.
Aloha, Senator. My name is Kalei Grant. Today I'm representing as a survivor of sex trafficking and leader in the movement to stop it. I work actively with state, federal government in many areas, policy, awareness, prevention of sex trafficking intervention, which is law enforcement. I work a lot with law enforcement in locating and recovering not only missing and exploited runaways, our youth, but also adults in different capacities, and also transitionals. What does it look like after a life of trafficking, the ongoing support resources, and that's what I've done for about 14 years now in my professional work. And first of all, I just want to thank you for working those countless years, hours to really push forward the VAWA Fix Act, because the need is there, is greatly there. And as a Native Hawaiian woman who has, you know, I grew up, born and raised here in Hawaii, this is also where I was trafficked. And so many of that happened here. And now what I'm doing is really changing the face of what does generational trauma look like? Well, it's going to start and end with me, that no longer will it continue. But now I have that power to change that and focus on generational healing. What does that look like? How can culture be a protective factor in preventing Indigenous or Native Hawaiian youth?
Can you give me an example of how a generational change or the cultural change can prevent
Yes.
exploitation?
Yes.
Just give me an example.
Sure. So we studied this. I was part of an Indigenous fellowship nationwide, one of 12 selected, and we got together monthly to focus on how can culture be a protective factor in preventing Indigenous youth from being bought and sold in sex trafficking, and you know, incorporating culture into our response, you know. And what we also found is a lot of times the perpetrators are within our own culture, are within our own community.
So how do you prevent that? Well, every area, awareness, but also making sure that there's intervention actively happening. And as she shared earlier, the youth that are recovered, for example, they keep going back because there's that dynamic of power and control. I call it the invisible chains, right? They may not be held, locked in, a room and shackled 24 hours a day. However, there's that fear that was instilled with them. There was violence, whether it was verbal, physical, in every aspect. And so what happens then is this girl thinks, or this boy or girl thinks that this person does love them, as they say. He may beat me sometimes, he may do this, sell me for sex, this, that, or another. However, they don't know anything different. So it is our, Juliana, our responsibility to really show forth and display what that looks like, creating communities where they can get that respite and healing. But it doesn't just stop there. It continues, because it's a lifelong journey to heal. And even as a survivor leader in this, it's a continued maintenance, right, of your healing, because you cannot give what you do not have. So just cultivating our culture to then provide forth in this healing for other victims and survivors, and connect so that they can connect again with their culture. I personally didn't have the opportunity, when I got out. However, if I did connect from the very beginning, I 100% think that that would have helped me so much so to connect again with my roots, who I am, doing practices, traditional healing practices, traditional, going back to the basics of who I am. And how you shift that is so much trauma has passed down from generations. And my ancestors, my putuna before me, I thought about this as preparing for this day, and I am a caretaker of my 88-year-old grandmother. I also have an 18-year-old daughter. And so I find myself the in-between, right? The protector of everything my ancestors before me fought for. Understanding they didn't know the trauma that they faced, but they had this trauma. Therefore, it kind of just passed down unknowingly to them. And now, when I have that power to put forth the work, the healing, put forth educating myself on what does that look like? How can I turn it around for my daughter and generations to come? And that's I think, a huge lesson for myself on my personal journey. That's how you shift the dynamics of what was generational trauma is now generational healing. Let's work on healing this. Let's work on ho'oponopono. Let's, understand what has happened and what is
So a lot of the work you do,
Yes.
individual you doing this work with.
Oh, no, ma'am.
So you have a.
So I currently work, again, I'm representing as a survivor leader today. I do work with the Attorney General's office, the Missing Child Center, actively. I also represent at the federal level with CTIP and OTIP in different capacities. And so, as she shared earlier, I just want to end with this, that it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community and then some to bring healing, health and healing to one child after trauma is done. And so I just want to thank you. And I think accountability is really the key part that I would like to see. Just weaving through all the partner agencies, because it takes many of us to come together. But accountability to a level of ensuring that what we say at the policy level is actually what's taking place on the ground, and it's being solved through.
Yeah, so you're working with the AG's office here,
Yes,
and they have a missing child center?
yes. To locate missing and exploited children. So we're the national clearinghouse. Every state has a national clearinghouse. So when a child goes missing, most of them are runaways. And that's the nexus that we found. They are being bought and sold for sex.
So there's a deputy attorney general who works on this particular
If they choose to, there's a brand new unit, that they're focusing on this issue.
Good, because I think my staff is meeting or talking with David's office, and when I used to be a deputy attorney general and stuff.
Yeah.
We had an office like this.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Ashley Maha'a. And I just want to say it is really an honor to be here. If you had known me 11 years ago, I would not have been invited to this table. It's been a really long and hard journey for myself. I am a subject matter expert in substance abuse, sex trafficking, domestic violence, and just overcoming poverty, the criminal justice system. My degree is in criminal justice from Chaminade University. And I felt really strongly about getting a degree in a place where I felt like I could impact the most change for those who have experienced sex trafficking. I work with, as a consultant for Polaris Project. We worked on the National Survivor Study, which focuses on the livelihoods of survivors. And so I brought some of the information today about what we have seen from the 460 survivors that we were able to survey. I also work with the victims of human trafficking Native communities. And so we go over accountability for all of the organizations who are receiving the grant for being organizations that specifically serve Native communities. And we really try to look at if they're doing it in a way that is truly helping the communities. And so we have an organization here that is receiving that funding as well.
Let me, I have five questions. So you work with organizations that get grant money?
No, I work with, so the Victims of Human Trafficking Native Communities is a federal organization that oversees the Office of Trafficking in Persons grant. And so we just,
Administers that particular grant, federal grant.
I am not sure exactly who, like how to access all the grants, because that's not. That's
Some of
not-
my staff is on the, look over here. Okay.
But I do know that part of the grant is that they have to serve Native communities.
Yeah.
And so we kind of look at their program and we look at their structure, who they're hiring, what they're doing, and we just give kind of our thoughts about if it is truly supporting the Native communities or harming. And so we look at things like how many people have you actually hired from the community? What practices are you utilizing? A big part of like my suggestion isn't that the organization receiving the funding suddenly become like the cultural experts. And instead, my suggestion is to hire someone else from an organization that does uphold Indigenous practices to come in and practice.
So you are involved with this is a national, a national effort.
Yes,
And
so
so-
I'm a consultant, and so, yeah, we just look over the programming for that.
Then you're familiar with the organizations in Hawaii
Yes,
that serve Native Hawaiian women
Yes.
and girls. Okay, can you share that this or whatever, because I'm trying to compile who gets money to get like.
Well,
gender-based violence
to
against-
kind of preface like what I see and just being totally transparent here. Here in Hawaii, we have the most nonprofits out of anywhere. We have so many people who truly want to do well. And what does end up happening is we have, I think, 4 or 5 organizations that say that they are helping sex trafficking or labor trafficking in one area.
Yes.
And so they're all kind of, there's funding, but there's not a plethora of funding. And so what ends up happening is like this organization is only going to help children. This organization is only going to do this. And so what I would like to see is more collaboration, because I feel like everyone's on a parallel journey and they're all helping who they help. But there's not much collaboration across the board. And so what ends up happening is that survivors are in these transitional periods between like, I have now exited and I'm trying to be a person who's thriving. But there's no services because I either have to be in this lane where this organization.
So
is
there
helping,
should be like
or
some
this-
about continuity.
Yes, like
Services.
continuum of care.
Whole person approach.
Yeah,
That is the impression that I have. It's not just in Hawaii, because you're doing a national, you're involved in it nationally, but there's sort of the small, the silo programming that happens to offer the scarce resources.
Yeah, and I feel like the continuum of care, because like my whole thing is that survivors go through a lot of transitional periods. It's not just, I have been trafficked and now I've exited. It's like I've exited and now how do I find a career that I enjoy? I've been doing this job, but how do I thrive? How do I live? How do I, find that happiness and true freedom?
So I would like to hear from the rest of you also about how we accomplish what you refer to as continuum of care, because I think that, would you agree that
Yes,
that is a,
life after
right, that's a
traffic.
gap
Yeah.
that we need to,
Yes,
how do we do it? So do you have some ideas on how we achieve a continuum of care?
I do. I would love to let everyone introduce themselves. But I do have like some ideas for sure.
Thank you, that's. go on.
Hi, Senator Sarah Kamakwi from Papa. Thanks so much for your work. I think in support of some of my CEOs, comments, I just want to thank you and your office for supporting the reauthorization efforts that we continue to work towards. And this issue is one that we want to include in our reauthorization language, in the intent of Congress, which is original from its 1988 passage. We are really grateful for your team constantly providing great feedback, and for the community who helps us to be informed on the issues so that these can be within POL's jurisdiction, so that our annual appropriations can be reasonably met to help fund some of the great community work on the ground. I think PAPA really is supposed to serve as a vehicle for Native Hawaiian health, so that much more can be getting done locally with community programs and folks who are able to speak to what is happening in the immediate issue. And so that our legislators can really focus on how to get dollars down into the state, and decision-making and program this and other components can be getting done with a more local focus, because we have so many wonderful advocates in this area. I think PAPA really looks forward to our reauthorization being more inclusive of issues that have come into more light in the last several decades. So thank you so much for you and all your work.
Thank you.
Aloha, aloha, Senator, and everybody, and mahalo for having us. My name is Sean Kanaio-Kumi. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Partners in Development Foundation, and we're a direct service provider like other people is. And so we serve thousands of families every year, most of them in low income and Native Hawaiian communities. I just want to thank you, Senator, for supporting us. And as you know, many organizations in the Native Hawaiian legislative community also thought it was very important to have the VAWA Act fixed so that we could be serving our Native Hawaiians, and just really appreciate you lobbying for that and bringing the data forward and creating visibility, because I think that is part of the issue, is the lack of visibility and general awareness about how much violence pervades the lives of our families. And we talk about commercial sex trafficking, and there's so much more beyond that too, right? That's part of the issue. But then there's also violence, and every day it feels like there's shootings and stabbings and so much more happening. Our young people are really struggling, as are the young families that we serve in our early childhood programs. PIDF doesn't do violence programming per se, but I think, we talk about the preventions of the intervention side, which is how do we work with victims who've been trafficked. And I'm so glad to see actually in play here at this table. On the prevention side is how do we work with families and young people as they start their families, so that they are more aware and also can deal with their own emotions about what they've seen in their own families, that there's a lot of stigma involved in resilience. Well, there's also there's just the way it is. Sometimes we see violence as part of the fabric of our communities, and that's the cycle that we need to try and break. And I think in the where we would like to be, and my board has said, hey, what can we do about the fact that 62% of sex trafficked people are sex trafficked women and girls are Native Hawaiian. We have to be part of the solution. I think we're best suited to be that early childhood intervention where we're working with young families and reaching them. We just recently did for all of our staff the domestic violence training, trauma-informed care trainings. And so we want to be poised to support good solutions right now, one of the issues, and you've been asking about, you know, where's the stickiness, right? Why aren't we getting resources to the community? I think there's a lack of resources. We need more funding. We need more visibility. We need more education. Those are the three things. And so good to know that all of these good efforts are happening. I feel like we're on a tipping point a little bit. And with some of us working together and holding hands, it actually create some good things together. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say that when, this is yet another area where it scarce resources, so the collaboration part is really important, because as each program maybe identifies their group of people that they work with, but you know, it's the stratified continuum of care. And I think that that's one of the things that you enable scarce resources to go farther. There's a lot more coordination and collaboration. It's how to do it that is the challenge.
I'm sorry, Carl, but I just wanted to let everyone know we have 10 minutes left. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you, I'll be brief. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you. You know, you walk the talk, Senator Hirono. This what we're seeing today is the tip of the iceberg to what your office has done in terms of investing in this work. So thank you first and foremost. But briefly, I just want to flag a couple pieces of local legislation.
Sorry, what's your name?
Oh, sorry. For the record, Karen Bullock Roll is Hawaii State Commission. Yeah. That's right. But then I want to talk about the military piece, because I know that that's a particular concern and interest to you. So first of all, one of the things that we've discussed is how narrow the path to exit the sex trade, whether or not someone's, you know, qualifies as sex trafficked or not, right? And so during the previous administration with the state AG, we worked out a compromise for immunity from arrest and prosecution for anyone in the sex trade who is selling sex themselves, whether, you know, they have a pimp or otherwise, or financially coerced, to be able to seek medical or law enforcement assistance without fear, which is really important to rebuild that relationship and show that there is support. So that's one of the state level pieces of legislation that I did want to flag that ties into, you know, what we've been talking about. But pivoting to the military, you know, first and foremost, two disclaimers. One is that this report did not have or produce or claim that there's data that the US military is disproportionately or specifically targeting Native Hawaiians. So I want to be really clear about that. However, we decided to put the military data, the arrest data into this report because of its historical nature. You know, in the past 10 years, I don't think we've seen aggregated data on military involvement with sexual violence here from the state level. And then secondly, because we understand that child sexual abuse ramps up a person's risk of eventually being sex trafficked, and that this issue is layered with many different forms of violence. So that was important. And then second of all, it's not to absolve local men from accountability, but because the US military is a unique industry here with unique aggregating factors, and because it's the second largest employer and something that you can do something about. So we've had a lot of different conversations that have spanned years actually with DOD and specifically Women, Peace and Security Division, which is the CTIP focal point for human trafficking here in Hawaii within US Indo-PACOM. However, what it seems like from our point of view is that the impact or the intended impact is not truly being felt. So some of the preliminary recommendations from the commission are these, because this occurs against this year, the DOD's sexual assault prevention report, their annual report, concluded that there's been an overall growth in what they described as an unhealthy military environment on sexual assault. And that the number of service members who've been sexually assaulted increased over the last several years and is now at 38,500 something service members. There's no analysis of the civilians that were also part of the numbers. So our proposal at the command level, first of all, is what we've spoken with CTEP leadership about this, is an anti-trafficking campaign for the entire US Indo-PACOM here in Hawaii, modeled after South Korea. So there was an anti-trafficking campaign in South Korea that included very clear signage at every single US military institution or installation rather, that included the consequences for contributing to sex trafficking through sex buying for solicitation. And that included an expanded off limits list, trainings with local partners. And so we want to explore how we can replicate the South Korea anti-trafficking campaign here. And they indicated support, so that was really positive. So
Working with here.
their local focal point for CTIP, her name is Sharon Feist. Sharon Feist, F-E-I-S-T.
F-E-I-S-T, Feist.
Yes, correct.
Okay, she's with DOD.
She's with DOD, US Indo-PACOM. She is what's called the Women, Peace and Security, WPS, director.
See,
It's like a,
wow.
it's like a state within a state, right? So it's.
Peace and Security Director. You know, for all the years that I've been on SAS, on Senate, on Service Committee, and we have focused on the sexual assault and exploitation and assault and harassment in the military. It continues to be a scourge, however, even if we made some major changes to the law as it relates to the personnel, but it continues to be a problem. So it's good to know. I did not know there was a person here. I hope that's who my office is meeting with, you know, who would, hello, Betty, whoever. Okay, I'll talk to you guys. Let's get with the right people. Who know. Thank you, continue.
I think lastly, my last point would be, I think it would be purposeful for perhaps you or our congressional members to submit an amendment for a new section to the NDAA. To submit an annual report on efforts specifically to combat commercial sexual exploitation, specifically sex buying itself.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's our final recommendation at this time. Thank you, Senator.
That's very specific.
Very specific.
Thank you. Okay, well, anyone have, you had some suggestions, any of you have any suggestions on how we can close the gap, how we can do better with the, you know, all of the different programmatic areas or the resources that you folks can bring to this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the National Survivor Study, like really kind of hit my heart was that out of the 437 survivors who did answer this question, only 17% were not working. They had no job, 17%. So the majority of us are not only working, but we're working multiple jobs. We had about 30% who are working multiple jobs. And 73% of the survivors are making under $50,000 a year, with 43% making less than $25,000.
So when you say survivors, they are out of the.
They have been out of, they have been out of sex trafficking. So these are survivors who are just trying to make it. And I kept saying, we're not making enough, we're underpaid, and we do have special circumstances. Survivors are coming out of this with trauma, they're coming out of this with criminal records, they're coming out of here with mental health issues, substance abuse, they're fighting child custody battles. We actually had a lot of survivors who are paying their abusers and their traffickers child support because they've lost their children. And so what this showed me, I mean, when I saw that, it's like I kept saying, we need better paying jobs. We can't survive. We are trying. We're not asking for a handout. We are asking for help. We need to be able to live, to dream, to do something. And like, we didn't get out of this situation to sit here and just struggle through life on assistance, all of that. And so this was actually like the hard numbers to see 43% of survivors who are like me working. I mean, I work multiple consultancies. I worked 13 different consultancies last year. And I can tell you that I was in that 25,000 for myself. 13, because I sat on multiple task forces, advisory boards, as one of the only unpaid people in the room. Being a survivor, someone with lived experience, doesn't always mean that I'm coming in here with the qualifications that allow me to have a paid position. And so for me, like what would really help is if there were transitional periods where if a survivor is trying to get a job, paying for childcare just for 6 months to a year would be life changing so we could get ahead. Rental assistance, you know, gas, car maintenance, a car, you know, like all these things, lawyers to help get rid of some of, you know, the charges that we have that are not just prostitution charges. We are seeing survivors with loitering, with disturbing the peace, with, you know, that's unfortunate. So just help with that as well, but really just like, if we could figure out a way to offer financial stability for just temporary, so we can just get over that hump. You know, and also more money to help with finding like career advancement. Like as a survivor, I did not come into the work field or college or anything with the understanding that you can actually get ahead in life. If I have a job, I'm just gonna sit there. I'm just gonna do it because I don't have that understanding of how to move forward. I didn't have the parents or anyone around me who were really telling me to like strive and achieve, you know, because I was out on my own for so long. And so giving survivors that understanding, that mentorship, that coaching, some of those skills, money for school to help them.
So is that
advance.
some of what Hawaiian does, though, provide that kind of sustained support?
Yeah, so our youth, we serve up to 24 years old, right? So after, you know, we transition them into transitional living homes. Yeah, and then we help them with that, but then they age out of our program. And that's where we have to, you know, like you're talking about, like.
They age out, and also a lot of the programs, even nationally, what I found, like I was trying to go for my master's and everyone only offers scholarship money for certification. So I can be an esthetician or work as a caregiver or do all of these jobs that just, as survivors, like you get to a point where you can do more. We want to do more, but there's nothing for us. So, you know, I'd already graduated. There was no higher degree scholarship. There was, you know, nothing to kind of get me forward so that I don't have to rely on working 13 different consultancies and chasing my tail around. So I feel like just different transitionary periods require different things. So yes, we need those certifications. There are people who that's all they can handle. 11 years ago, I was a caregiver. It was paid for through the state of Washington. And I was a certified nurse assistant. That was all I could handle. But then what happens when I want to be a nurse? What happens when I want to, you know, extend my career? I'm stuck with this one certification and no idea of how to actually get ahead or get into a job that would have a higher income.
So if you don't mind me asking that, are you not able to support yourself through your consulting?
No, this is the first year that I've actually seen a growth because I have been very vocal about the fact that for the past 7 years I've been in this, I did volunteer work. I worked for free. A lot of my speaking engagements, last year was the first year I was paid to actually speak. And so I did a lot of that stuff because I felt it in my heart. It was the right thing to do. But after a while, like I have a family, you know, and I want to beat that generational poverty and generational trauma. And how do you do that when you're just scraping by? And for myself, if it wasn't for my husband having a job, I mean, if anything happened to him, I would be in a very vulnerable situation. So he is the only reason that like we are able to survive, but me alone, no, not at all. I would not be able to support my family. If anything happened to him, it would not be good.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of what she shared, part of that, I know that OVC does specify in some of their grants that a
OVC, what?
Office of Victim of Crime. So sorry. We get in this acronym. But part of a requirement to be eligible for their grants regarding human trafficking work is to have a survivor leader not only be part of the table or, you know, just named, but leading the initiative. Because at every level, we see through a lens that you may not see. And so one of the benefits of having a subject matter expert there is so that we can help be a part of that. And so one of those requirements, I mean, I just think that's a tiny piece that can help to acknowledge survivor leaders and compensate them for the knowledge that we do bring. And that's a start of having that as a requirement. And again, there's so much to share regarding this issue and how to close the gap. So, we look forward to continued conversations.
So Kara, you were the director of the task force. So what are the next steps? So I would like what specific language for the next idea, but there are some specific recommendations and there are important next steps.
Sure. Well, actually, we're heading into phase 2 essentially. So phase 2 is the more community facing, quality facing research that can fill in the anemic data, that is there based on some of the collection. And Lisa's been absolutely instrumental in designing our research plan. And so Lisa, I don't know if you have anything to add to the second year.
Yeah, so the second year, we are going to be doing, as Tara said, the community phase and the more qualitative phase, so gathering more of a deep dive on some of the issues, the barriers, the challenges across groups. So that would include our survivor groups, that would include Ohana adult survivors, that would include our police. And as well as our community stakeholders, right, and start moving across. We're also going to continue and have actually just last week, we're going to be continuing to try and gather the data, police data, which has been difficult in the first year because everybody's trying to figure out what is the data we need, how we get it, what are the pathways to getting that data, and every county is different. So we're going to still collect quantitative data, but we're also going to now focus on some of the qualitative data and some of the stakeholders information.
So there's the data collection part, but there is also the correct me if I not accurate on this, but really the instance of the gender-based violence against foreign women and girls has not received that much attention, and on the missing. The missing and murdered Native women, but this also impacts American Indian women and girls and Alaska Natives. So all of the indigenous groups have a certain data. They're just really not good. So part of what I try to do is, for example, when the FBI director testified before the Judiciary Committee, I said, how much effort are you putting into addressing the issue of Native Hawaiian missing and murdered women and girls? And he said it's an issue. So, I think part of what I do is to have an awareness of raising these issues with people who come and testify, so that what happens to Native Hawaiian women and girls is that the profile is raised, but it's a huge area of concern. I'm going to be meeting with the governor this afternoon, and wouldn't it be good if the governor says this is an issue that we need to deal with as a state, as a community. So I will tell him that I met with all of you today. There's a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of collaboration needs to happen, but I hope that he will decide that this is something that is going to be on his plate.
Thank you. And so we've reached the end of our time.
Okay.
No, but that's part of my discussion. Sorry.
By the way, were survivors involved in your task force?
These are some of our experts.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
So we have a group called Community Against Exploitation Hawaii. It is completely survivor and lived experience led. And it is the first of its kind. We're hoping that we can reach nonprofit status, but we feel concerned because of the plethora of nonprofits in this space. So we're trying to figure out what most ethical and the best way for those with lived experience who are also
What is your group called?
Community Against Exploitation Hawaii. We shorten it for CAXHI, but
Community Against Exploitation.
Hawaii, yeah.
And it is a survivor group.
It is completely a survivor led, and we're just trying to create what we want to see in that continuum of care. And trying to create unique fundings for how to make a livable wage, an unlivable wage livable, and more continuum of care for like mentoring, coaching.
We did say that you're trying to get into become a 501c.
We are kind of, right now, we're just like a group of survivors that meet and we do a lot of work and we're trying to figure out which path is the way to go because we see that there's so many nonprofits, so like entering as another nonprofit in this space might not be right.
Yeah.
But we are a group of survivors and we definitely try to just do as much work as we can.
When did this group form?
So we formed during the pandemic. So in 2020, it was kind of like a thought, and in 2021, we gathered together. And we've just kind of been like meeting informally, but we have been a part of a lot of, you know, different efforts. The guaranteed income was something that we felt really strongly about to try and again, like try and get a continuum of care financially so survivors can get out of a transitional period.
Colleen, are you involved with this?
Yes, I am aware, because of my role with the AGs, it kind of restricts me. However, I fully support a lot of their efforts and what they do, and I share, and I was a part of maybe the first meeting. Just to advise and be involved, any way that I can.
I'm sorry, you say you have a role with the AD, do they pay you to?
I'm a full-time, salary, I'm in the executive office with the Attorney General's office,
I
so.
didn't know that.
Yeah, so in crime prevention, division, and so because of that, you know, there's some parameters for your, that's the only
Paid employee.
Well, yeah.
So I hope a lot of other opportunities to talk with you all as we go forward. I know everybody's scheduled for this, so I thank you all. The research part is really important, the data collection, your, you know, programmatic support is really critical, and thank you, Oha, for putting this on it. That is on your radar screen.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. If you read the documents to governor, our front page made a commitment to 100 million in climate change. Not that climate change is not important, but so is the strength of our families.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
if you're gonna have that. That'll be a great. I like that. Thank you for that.
And if I could,
Yeah.
Yeah.